The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the dense forest as I approached the secluded cottage. It was a quaint, charming structure nestled in the heart of the woods, surrounded by towering trees and the hush of nature. I had stumbled upon it almost by accident during my hike, exhausted and seeking shelter from an unexpected rainstorm. My clothes were drenched, and every step felt heavier than the last as I trudged through the muddied path. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees standing tall and ancient, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The distant rumble of thunder echoed through the woods, and I quickened my pace, desperate to find refuge from the impending storm. As I rounded a bend in the path, the cottage came into view, its warm light spilling out from the windows, offering a glimmer of hope in the encroaching darkness. My heart leapt with relief, and I quickened my pace, eager to escape the rain that had turned the forest into a sea of mud. The moment I stepped inside the cottage, the contrast between the exterior world and the interior warmth was like night and day. The air was cool and musty, and the fading light filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the encroaching darkness outside. A fireplace crackled in the corner, filling the room with both warmth and the comforting scent of burning wood. I let out a sigh of relief as I kicked off my muddy boots, grateful to have found this sanctuary in the midst of the wilderness. My backpack dropped onto the wooden floor with a thud, and I took a moment to examine my surroundings. The cottage seemed like something out of a fairy tale, rustic, charming, and just a touch mysterious. A worn leather armchair sat by the fireplace, its cushions invitingly plump. I sank into it with a contented sigh, feeling the warmth of the flames against my skin. The flickering light danced across the walls, casting playful shadows that seemed to sway to the rhythm of the fire's crackle. It was as if the cottage itself was alive, welcoming me with open arms. My attention was drawn to a book that lay open on a small table beside the fireplace. Its pages were yellowed with age, and the script was written in an elaborate style that seemed to belong to a different era. The title read, "The Monsters Beyond the Woods." I chuckled to myself as I read the title, assuming it was a clever joke left behind by a previous visitor. Monsters in the Woods. It sounded like the beginning of a campfire story. I flipped through the pages, half expecting to find descriptions of fantastical creatures that lurked in the shadows. Instead, the book seemed filled with warnings and instructions.
The monsters will come when the moon is at its zenith.
The text read,
They will whisper promises of secrets and treasures, but their intentions are malevolent. Lock all doors and windows, and do not venture outside until dawn.
I scoffed at the words, dismissing them as an elaborate prank. It was hard to believe that anyone would take these warnings seriously. Nevertheless, I decided to keep the book nearby, thinking it might provide a good laugh later on. The hours passed, and the moon rose high in the sky. The room was dimly lit by the flickering fire, and I found myself immersed in a different book, eager to pass the time until I could continue my journey the next day. The time ticked away, and before I knew it, the clock on the wall struck midnight. As if on cue, a soft rustling sound came from outside. I froze, my heart racing as the words from the book echoed in my mind. Monsters in the woods. It couldn't be possible. But then, the whispers started. Faint at first, like a distant breeze. I strained to hear them, chills running down my spine. Curiosity got the best of me, and against my better judgment, I approached the window. I peered outside into the darkness, my breath caught in my throat. Shadows moved among the trees, their forms indistinct and eerie. The whispers grew louder, their words like sirens' call, tempting and ominous. With a sinking feeling, I realized that the book hadn't been a joke at all. The warnings were real, and the monsters were outside, just beyond the safety of the cottage. Panic set in, and I rushed to lock all the doors and windows, my hands trembling. The whispers grew in intensity, their voices a cacophony of promises and threats. I huddled in a corner, the fire casting dancing shadows around the room, each flicker reflecting my fear. Time passed in a blur, the minutes stretching into an agonizing eternity. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, the whispers faded away. The monsters retreated into the woods, their presence replaced by the comforting sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves. I let out a shaky breath, realizing that I had survived the night. As the sun rose, I packed my belongings and left the cottage behind, my thoughts consumed by the haunting experience of the previous night. The warnings in the book had been all too real, a reminder that sometimes the darkness that exists beyond our understanding can't be ignored. To this day, I can still hear the faint echoes of the whispers in the wind, a chilling reminder of the night I spent in the cottage in the middle of the forest. And whenever I'm tempted to dismiss the unexplainable as mere fantasy, I remember the monsters that wandered beyond the woods, their presence a testament to the mysteries that linger just beyond the edge of our perception. The morning light bathed the cottage in a soft glow as I stepped outside, my heart still racing from the events of the previous night. The air was crisp and cool, carrying with it the earthy scent of the forest. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. It was hard to believe that just hours ago those same woods had been filled with whispers in the presence of unseen creatures. As I walked through the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle of leaves and every distant sound sent a shiver down my spine. The book's warnings echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the invisible boundary that separated the safety of the cottage from the unknown terrors of the woods. My journey through the forest took on an entirely new dimension. The once familiar beauty of nature now veiled in an eerie uncertainty. The sun had fully risen, casting dappled light through the canopy above. Yet, even in the daylight, the shadows seemed to dance in strange patterns, igniting my imagination with fleeting glimpses of movement. Hours passed, and I eventually emerged from the woods, the sight of a road offering a stark contrast to the wilderness. I hailed a passing car, and the driver kindly offered me a ride to the nearest town. As the miles rolled by, I recounted the events of the previous night to the driver, unsure whether to expect skepticism or understanding. To my surprise, the driver nodded in acknowledgement. "The woods hold many secrets," they said cryptically. "Some things are best left undisturbed." Those words resonated with me as I arrived at the town and continued my journey, eventually putting the cottage and the forest behind me. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had glimpsed something beyond the ordinary, something that defied explanation. Time passed, and the memory of that night began to fade, replaced by the routines of daily life. Yet, a part of me remained haunted by the whispers, the shadows, and the book's warnings. It was as if I had brushed against a hidden realm that existed just beyond the veil of our reality. Years went by, and I found myself drawn back to the woods, to the place where the cottage had stood. The passage of time had taken its toll. The cottage was now a decaying relic reclaimed by nature. As I stood before its remains, the memories flooded back, each detail vivid as if the events had transpired only yesterday. I traced my fingers over the pages of the book, still intact despite the passage of time. The words seemed to hold a weight that transcended their ink and paper, a weight that spoke of ancient truths and untold mysteries. And as I stood there, surrounded by the whispering trees, I realized that the monsters beyond the woods were not mere figments of imagination. They were guardians of a realm that existed at the fringes of our perception, creatures that defied explanation and challenged the boundaries of our understanding. I had glimpsed their world, and it had forever changed the way I viewed the reality that lay before me. As the sun set, casting long shadows through the trees, I closed the book and took a step back. The whispers of the woods seemed to echo in the breeze, a soft murmur that held both warning and invitation. I knew that I would never fully understand the mysteries that had unfolded that night, but I also knew that some secrets were not meant to be unraveled. And so, with a final glance at the remains of the cottage, I turned and walked away from the woods, carrying with me the memory of a night that had opened my eyes to the unknown. The monsters beyond the woods had become a part of my story, a reminder that there are depths to our world that defy explanation, and that the boundaries of reality are more malleable than we could ever imagine.